I'm Victoria, 32 years old, and I never expected to defend my baby's paternity in the middle of a crowded mall. When my mother-in-law loudly announced this child might not be my son's, I felt my world crumble. The stares from strangers, the humiliation, and my husband's failure to take my side pushed me to make a decision that day. I walked away, and what happened next changed everything. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had to deal with a difficult in-law, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when nobody else will. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew each other. My parents raised me with strong values about honesty, respect, and standing up for what's right. My father worked as a high school teacher and my mother ran a small bakery downtown. We weren't wealthy, but we had everything we needed and our home was filled with love and laughter. From a young age, I knew I wanted to help people, especially children. After high school, I pursued nursing and eventually specialized in pediatrics. There's something incredibly fulfilling about helping sick children and supporting their families through difficult times. For 8 years, I worked at Children's Hospital in Columbus, building a career I was proud of. I met Michael at a hospital charity gala. He was there representing his tech company, which had donated significant funds to the pediatric oncology department. Michael stood out immediately, not just because of his tall frame and warm smile, but because of how genuinely interested he was in the hospital's work. While other corporate donors were networking and taking photos for publicity, Michael was asking thoughtful questions about how the funds would directly impact patients. Our conversation that night flowed effortlessly. Michael was intelligent, funny, and seemed to share many of my values. He asked for my number, and the next day he called to invite me to dinner. Our first date turned into a second, then a third, and before I knew it, we were spending every free moment together. Michael was a software engineer who had built a successful career developing healthcare applications. He came from a wealthy family. His father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, and his mother Evelyn came from old money. Despite his privileged background, Michael was down to earth and generous. He volunteered regularly and lived in a modest apartment, saving most of his income for the future. When Michael introduced me to his parents 6 months into our relationship, I was understandably nervous. His father, Robert, was immediately welcoming with a firm handshake and genuine interest in my work. Evelyn, however, was polite but distant. She smiled at all the right moments and asked appropriate questions, but there was something calculating behind her eyes that made me uneasy. A nurse? Practical, she said when Michael told her about my profession. I always thought Michael would end up with someone in business or law. She laughed lightly as if making a joke, but the message was clear. Michael squeezed my hand under the table and quickly changed the subject. Later, when I mentioned her comment, he assured me that his mother was just old-fashioned and would warm up to me eventually. I wanted to believe him, and in my love-struck state, it was easy to dismiss those early warning signs. Our relationship progressed quickly. After just 1 year of dating, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Erie. It was perfect. Sunset on the beach with waves gently lapping at the shore as he got down on one knee. I said yes without hesitation, and we began planning our life together. The wedding was a compromise, smaller than what Evelyn wanted, but more elaborate than what my family could comfortably afford. Michael and I covered most of the costs ourselves, wanting to start our marriage without financial obligations to either family. Still, Evelyn managed to exert her influence, insisting on certain traditions and venues that she deemed appropriate. Again, Michael assured me it was easier to accommodate her on small things than to fight every battle. Once we're married, we'll set better boundaries, he promised. She just wants to feel involved. After the wedding, Michael and I moved into a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood. We both wanted to start a family right away. I was 29 and we didn't want to wait too long. We painted a nursery, bought books on parenting, and started trying for a baby immediately. But months passed without success. 6 months turned into a year, then 2 years of negative pregnancy tests, timed intercourse, and mounting frustration. We underwent fertility testing, which showed no obvious issues. The doctors called it unexplained infertility, a diagnosis that offered no clear solutions. The struggle took an emotional toll on both of us. I began to wonder if there was something wrong with me, if I'd somehow failed as a woman. Michael was supportive, holding me through tearful nights and reassuring me that we would be parents one day, one way or another. It was during this difficult time that Evelyn began inserting herself more prominently into our lives. She would call Michael multiple times a day, drop by unannounced, and offer unsolicited advice about everything from my diet to our bedroom habits. Maybe if you weren't working such long shifts, your body would be more receptive, she told me one evening over dinner. In my day, women prioritized family over career. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was just concerned in her own misguided way. Michael would give me apologetic glances but rarely contradicted his mother directly. Then just when we were considering fertility treatments, I missed my period. I didn't dare hope at first, having experienced so many disappointments. But when the home pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, I burst into tears of joy. Michael and I held each other, overwhelmed with gratitude and excitement. When we shared the news with our families, my parents were ecstatic. They cried, hugged us, and immediately started talking about baby names and nursery themes. Evelyn's reaction was markedly different. Her smile seemed forced and her eyes narrowed slightly. "How wonderful," she said flatly. "When exactly did this happen? I'm trying to remember when you said you were ovulating." I was taken aback by the invasiveness of her question. I hadn't shared my ovulation schedule with her. Why would I? Michael quickly interjected, changing the subject to due dates and doctor appointments. As I left the room to help my mother-in-law with dessert, I overheard her say to Michael, "It's just surprising after all this time. Almost miraculous timing, wouldn't you say?" I didn't understand what she was implying then, but it was the first hint of the accusations to come. My pregnancy was not the glowing, joyful experience I had always imagined. From the beginning, I suffered from hyperemesis gravidarum, severe morning sickness that often required IV fluids to combat dehydration. There were days when I couldn't keep even water down, and the constant nausea was debilitating. Michael was my rock during this time. He rearranged his work schedule to take me to appointments, held my hair back during endless bouts of sickness, and researched every possible remedy that might offer relief. When I was hospitalized for dehydration in my first trimester, he slept in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside me, refusing to leave my side. While Michael stepped up admirably, Evelyn used my difficult pregnancy as an opportunity to increase her presence in our lives. She would arrive at our house unannounced, claiming she was just checking in or bringing some soup. But instead of being helpful, her visits became a source of stress. "You're not eating enough protein," she would criticize, examining the contents of our refrigerator. When I was pregnant with Michael, I never missed a meal, no matter how I felt. She questioned every decision I made, from the prenatal vitamins I took to my choice of obstetrician. When I mentioned we were considering a birthing center rather than a hospital, she launched into a 20-minute lecture about how I was gambling with her grandchild's life. Michael was born in St. Mary's Hospital, where all the Thornton babies are born, she insisted. It's tradition. The baby shower became another battleground. My mother and sister had planned to host a small gathering with close friends and family. 2 weeks before the event, I discovered that Evelyn had contacted them, insisting on moving the shower to her country club and taking over the guest list. "Victoria doesn't know the right people." "Yes," I overheard her telling my sister on the phone. "This baby is a Thornton, and the shower should reflect that." My sister, bless her, stood her ground, but compromised by allowing Evelyn to invite some of her friends to our original venue. The result was an uncomfortable mix of my loved ones and Evelyn's socialite acquaintances, most of whom I'd never met. These women circled me like elegant vultures, asking probing questions about my background and making comments about how different I was from Michael's previous girlfriends. Even my parents, who were normally reluctant to interfere in my marriage, began expressing concerns about Evelyn's behavior. "She seems very controlling," my mother said carefully after the shower. "Is everything okay between you two?" I assured her that things were fine, that Evelyn was just excited about her first grandchild. But privately, I was becoming increasingly disturbed by my mother-in-law's behavior. The breaking point came when I was 7 months pregnant. I came home early from a doctor's appointment to find Evelyn in our bedroom, going through a folder of my medical records that I kept in my nightstand. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my heart racing with anger and disbelief. Evelyn didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "I need to know everything about my grandchild," she said, as if her invasion of privacy was perfectly reasonable. "Michael mentioned you had some abnormal test results and he wasn't clear on the details." This was a lie. All my tests had come back normal, and Michael and I discussed every aspect of my prenatal care together. When I confronted Michael about it later, he He seemed genuinely shocked that his mother would do such a thing, but still tried to minimize the situation. "She's just worried, he said. "That's just how she is. She needs to feel in control. Let's not make a big deal out of it." But it was a big deal. As my due date approached, I felt increasingly isolated. Evelyn had somehow inserted herself into every aspect of my pregnancy, from the colour of the nursery walls to the paediatrician we would use after the birth. Michael, while loving and supportive in many ways, seemed blind to how his mother's behaviour was affecting me. When Noah was born after 18 hours of labour, it was the most profound moment of my life. He was perfect, 6 pounds 8 ounces with a full head of dark hair and olive skin. He didn't look much like either Michael, who had light brown hair and fair skin, or me, blonde with blue eyes, but babies often don't resemble their parents right away. Evelyn, however, immediately fixated on Noah's appearance. "He's so dark," she said, examining him in the hospital bassinet. "Who does he look like? Victoria, someone in your family?" The question seemed innocent enough, but her tone carried an implication that made my postpartum hormones surge with defensive anger. Michael's father quickly intervened, pointing out that Michael's Italian grandmother had similar colouring, and the moment passed. The first few weeks after Noah's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, breastfeeding struggles, and the overwhelming love I felt for my son. Michael took 2 weeks of paternity leave, during which he was an equal partner in Noah's care, changing diapers, soothing late-night cries, and supporting me through the physical recovery of childbirth. But when Michael returned to work, Evelyn ramped up her presence again. She would arrive early in the morning and stay until evening, criticising my breastfeeding technique, rearranging the nursery, and making comments about Noah's appearance. "His features are so distinctive," she would say, studying his face. "I just don't see much of Michael in him, do you?" Each comment was like a small cut, barely noticeable on its own, but collectively creating a wound that was beginning to fester. I was exhausted, emotional, and increasingly feeling like I had to defend my motherhood and my integrity in my own home. By the time Noah was 3 months old, I was desperate for a change of scenery. The walls of our house felt like they were closing in on me, and Evelyn's near-constant presence had turned our home into a battleground. I decided to take Noah to the mall, our first real outing since his birth that wasn't a doctor's appointment. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I carefully timed our trip between Noah's feedings. I dressed him in an adorable blue onesie my sister had given him, packed a diaper bag with every conceivable item we might need, and headed to the Eastland Mall with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. For the first hour, everything went wonderfully. Noah was calm and alert, looking around with wide, curious eyes at the lights and sounds. I felt a surge of confidence as I navigated the stroller through the crowds, stopping occasionally to browse baby clothes, or just enjoy being out in the world again. For the first time in months, I felt like myself. Not just a milk machine or a target for Evelyn's criticism, but Victoria again. That feeling of normalcy shattered when I entered the food court and spotted Evelyn sitting with 3 elegantly dressed women at a table near the sushi restaurant. My first instinct was to turn around and leave, but before I could retreat, Evelyn saw me and waved enthusiastically. "Victoria, what a surprise, Mus!" She called out loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Come meet my friends." Trapped. I plastered on a smile and wheeled the stroller over to their table. Evelyn's friends, Barbara, Judith, and Margaret, were all around her age with the same carefully maintained appearance and subtle designer clothes that signalled old money. "This is my daughter-in-law, Victoria." Evelyn introduced me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And this is Noah, my grandson." The women made appropriate cooing noises and leaned in to look at Noah, who had thankfully remained asleep despite the noise. "He's gorgeous," Barbara said, then added with a puzzled expression, "But he doesn't look much like Michael, does he? Those dark features." Before I could respond, Evelyn laughed lightly and said the words that would change everything. "This child might not be my son's. Victoria was away on a girls' trip right around conception time." The statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The food court seemed to go silent, though logically I knew conversations around us continued. Barbara and Judith exchanged shocked glances, while Margaret had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn maintained her pleasant smile. "Oh, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, dear. The timing was certainly convenient. After years of trying, you go away for a weekend with your college friends and come back pregnant. And now the baby has features that don't match either of you." My hands began to shake as I gripped the stroller handle. How dare you, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. How dare you suggest that I cheated on Michael? Noah is your son's child. Well, he looks remarkably like that ex-boyfriend of yours, Evelyn continued, seemingly enjoying my distress. The one from Puerto Rico, Miguel, was it? My ex-boyfriend's name was Marco, and he was Italian-American, not Puerto Rican. We had dated briefly in college years before I met Michael. I had mentioned him exactly once during a conversation about first relationships. The fact that Evelyn had not only remembered, but was now twisting this information to cast doubt on my fidelity was breathtaking in its calculation. People at nearby tables were openly staring now. A woman pulled her children closer as if infidelity might be contagious. An elderly man shook his head disapprovingly. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to break down in front of Evelyn and her friends. This conversation is over, I said, my voice trembling with rage and humiliation. You've just crossed a line you can't come back from. I pulled out my phone and called Michael, moving a few steps away from the table, but keeping my eyes on Noah. When he answered, I could barely speak through my tears. Victoria, what's wrong? Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. Your mother, I managed to say. She's at the mall with her friends and she just told everyone, that Noah might not be yours, that I cheated on you. Michael, I can't do this anymore. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I'm sure she didn't mean it that way, Michael said finally. You know how she talks sometimes. Just try to calm down and... Calm down, I hissed into the phone. She publicly accused me of infidelity and questioned our son's paternity in the middle of the food court, and you're telling me to calm down. While I was on the phone, Evelyn approached the stroller and reached for Noah. Let me take him, she said loudly. You're clearly too emotional right now. Don't touch him, I warned, ending my call with Michael. Don't you dare touch my son. Evelyn ignored me and began unfastening Noah's stroller straps. You're making a scene, she said through clenched teeth. People are staring. Let me take Noah home and you can collect yourself. Something primitive and protective surged through me. I slapped her hands away from my baby and screamed, Help, this woman is trying to take my baby. Male security appeared almost instantly, a tall man with a kind face and a shorter woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. What's going on here? The woman asked, looking between me and Evelyn. This is my grandson, Evelyn said smoothly. My daughter-in-law is having some kind of episode. I was just trying to help. She's lying, I said, wiping tears from my face. This is my son. She just publicly accused me of cheating on my husband and questioned my baby's paternity, and now she's trying to take him from me. The female security guard turned to Evelyn. Ma'am, do you have any legal right to remove this child from his mother's custody? Evelyn faltered. Well, no, but... Then I suggest you step back, the guard said firmly. Ma'am? She continued, addressing me. Do you need assistance getting to your car? I nodded gratefully, and the male guard offered to escort me. As we walked away, I heard Evelyn calling after me. Victoria, don't be ridiculous. Come back here. But I didn't look back. With security walking beside me, I made it to my car, carefully secured Noah in his car seat, and drove straight to my parents' house, hands shaking on the steering wheel the entire way. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house was a blur of tears and racing thoughts. Noah thankfully slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware of the family drama unfolding around him. I called my mother from the car, managing only to say, I'm coming over. Something happened. Before breaking down again, when I arrived, my parents were waiting at the door. One look at my face told them everything they needed to know about my emotional state. My father immediately took the sleeping Noah, while my mother guided me to the living room couch. What happened, sweetheart? My mother asked, sitting beside me and taking my trembling hands in hers. Through sobs, I told them everything. The scene at the mall, Evelyn's public accusation, Michael's inadequate response, and my flight to their house. As I spoke, my father's face grew increasingly red with anger, while my mother's expression shifted from concern to outrage. That woman has gone too far, my father said, when I finished pacing the living room with Noah still cradled protectively in his arms. I'm calling Michael right now. No, Dad, I said quickly. I need to be the one to talk to him, but not yet. I need time to think. My phone had been buzzing continuously with texts and calls from Michael. I ignored them all, needing space to process what had happened and decide on my next steps. My mother made tea and we sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation settling around us like a heavy blanket. You know you can stay here as long as you need, my mother said finally. Your old room is always yours. I nodded gratefully. My childhood bedroom had been converted to a guest room years ago, but it still held the comfort of home of safety. I think I need to at least for tonight. I can't face Michael or Evelyn right now. After helping me settle Noah into a makeshift crib, a drawer from my old dresser padded with blankets, my parents gave me space to call Michael back. By then it was early evening and I had 17 missed calls and 22 text messages. I took a deep breath and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Victoria, thank God. Where are you? Are you okay? Is Noah okay? We're at my parents' house, I said, my voice flat with emotional exhaustion. And no, I'm not okay. Your mother publicly accused me of cheating on you and implied that Noah isn't yours. How could I possibly be okay? There was a pause on the other end. I'm sure she didn't mean it like that, Michael said, though his voice lacked conviction. You know how she can be sometimes. She says things without thinking. His defense of Evelyn, however half-hearted, ignited my anger anew. No, Michael, this wasn't some thoughtless comment. She deliberately humiliated me in public. She tried to take Noah from me, and when I called you, my husband who should be on my side, you told me to calm down. I was at work in the middle of a meeting, Michael protested. I didn't understand what was happening. Then let me make it very clear, I said, my voice gaining strength. Your mother has been undermining me since the day we met. She's questioned my adequacy as a wife, criticized my pregnancy, and now she's attacked my integrity as a mother. And you have allowed it to happen. Michael was silent for a moment. That's not fair, he said finally. I've defended you plenty of times. Not when it matters, I replied. Not when it would mean actually standing up to her. My mother knocked gently on the door, then entered with the portable phone. Victoria, your father wants to speak with Michael, she said, holding out the receiver. I nodded and said to Michael, my dad wants to talk to you. I'm putting him on. Before Michael could protest, I handed the phone to my father, who took it and left the room. I couldn't hear his exact words, but the stern tone of his voice carried through the closed door. My mother sat beside me on the bed, her arm around my shoulders. He needed to hear it from someone else, she said quietly. Sometimes people can't see what's right in front of them when it comes to their own parents. When my father returned, his expression was grim but satisfied. I told him exactly what happened from your perspective. He seemed shocked. I think he genuinely didn't understand the severity of the situation. I took the phone back, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was different, subdued, even shaken. Victoria, I'm so sorry. Your dad told me everything. I had no idea it was that bad. I know my mother can be difficult, but I never thought she would go this far. Well, she did, I said. And I need you to understand something, Michael. I will not bring Noah back to a home where his grandmother can question his paternity and his mother's faithfulness. I won't expose him to that toxic environment. What are you saying, Michael asked, alarm evident in his voice. I'm saying I need time to think about our future, and I need something else too. On anything, Michael said quickly. Whatever you need. I want a paternity test, I said firmly. Not because there's any doubt in my mind, but because I want proof to shove in your mother's face. I want to settle this once and for all. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was tight with hurt. You want a paternity test, Victoria? I trust you. I know Noah is mine. This isn't about your trust in me, I explained. It's about giving Evelyn no ammunition. It's about protecting our son from her insinuations as he grows up. Because if we don't address this now definitively, she will always hold this over my head, over his head. After another pause, Michael agreed reluctantly. We arranged to meet at a clinic the following week for the test, and I informed him that Noah and I would be staying with my parents until then. Can I at least see him? Michael asked, his voice breaking. Please, Victoria. He's my son too. We agreed that Michael could visit Noah at my parents' house, but I made it clear that Evelyn was not welcome. Michael accepted this condition without argument, which gave me a small measure of hope that he was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Over the next week, I began to form a plan. This wasn't just about proving Noah's paternity. It was about fundamentally changing the dynamic in our family. I researched grandparents' rights laws in our state, consulted with a family therapist about narcissistic family dynamics, and started documenting every incident with Evelyn that I could remember. Michael visited every day, bringing diapers, formula, and other necessities. He was attentive with Noah and clearly heartbroken about our separation, but I remained firm in my resolve. This pattern of behavior had to stop, and I was the only one who could force the change. 5 days after the mall incident, Evelyn showed up unannounced at my parents' house. My father answered the door and upon seeing her, stepped outside and closed the door behind him. I couldn't hear their conversation, but when he came back inside 10 minutes later, his face was flushed with anger. She wanted to explain her side, he reported. I told her that there is no explanation for accusing my daughter of infidelity and trying to take her child. I informed her that she is not welcome in this house and that if she returns, we will consider it trespassing. My mother squeezed his hand in solidarity. Good, she said simply. That evening, Michael called, sounding more decisive than he had in days. I talked to my father about what happened, he said. He's furious with Mom. He said this isn't the first time she's done something like this. Apparently she accused his secretary of stealing once with no evidence. Dad had to pay the woman a settlement to avoid a lawsuit. This information didn't surprise me, but it seemed to have been a revelation to Michael. I'm starting to see a pattern, he admitted, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I promise you, Victoria, things will be different from now on. I wanted to believe him, but I had heard promises before. This time I needed action, and I had a plan to make sure it happened. The paternity test results arrived exactly 1 week after the mole incident. As I had known all along, Michael was confirmed to be Noah's biological father, with 99.98% certainty. The relief I felt wasn't about the result itself, I had never doubted that, but about having concrete scientific proof to counter Evelyn's accusations. I arranged to meet Michael at a small coffee shop near my parents' house. It was neutral territory away from both our home, which felt contaminated by Evelyn's presence, and my parents' house where Michael was still somewhat on edge. I arrived early, securing a quiet table in the corner where we could talk privately. Michael looked exhausted when he arrived. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he had lost weight since I'd left. Despite everything, my heart ached at the sight of him. I still loved this man deeply, but love wasn't enough anymore. We needed fundamental change. I have the results, I said after he sat down, sliding the envelope across the table. Michael opened it, scanned the contents, and closed his eyes briefly. I never doubted it, he said quietly. Not for a second. I know, I acknowledged, but your mother did, and she made sure everyone around us doubted it too. Michael nodded, folding the paper carefully and returning it to the envelope. What happens now, Victoria? When are you and Noah coming home? I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the conversation I had rehearsed dozens of times in my head. That depends on you, Michael. I've done a lot of thinking this week, and I've come to some conclusions. I pulled out a notebook where I had organized my thoughts. For the past 3 years, your mother has been a destructive force in our marriage. She has criticized me, undermined me, invaded my privacy, and now questioned my fidelity and our son's paternity. And throughout all of this, you have enabled her behavior. Michael started to protest, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I understand that standing up to your mother is difficult. I understand that she's manipulated you since childhood to prioritize her feelings and needs. But I cannot, will not, subject myself or our son to that toxic dynamic any longer. I laid out 2 options for Michael. Option 1. We begin couples therapy immediately. You establish and maintain firm boundaries with your mother, including limited supervised contact with Noah. You make it clear to her that any further attacks on me or insinuations about Noah's paternity will result in her losing access to both of you. We work together to build a healthier family dynamic. Michael nodded, looking relieved that reconciliation was on the table. And option 2, he asked. Option 2 is separation, I said firmly. I file for primary custody of Noah with liberal visitation for you. Your mother gets no guaranteed access to Noah. We co-parent but live separate lives. Michael's face fell. You would divorce me over this. This isn't just about your mother's behavior, Michael. It's about your response to it. Every time you've dismissed my concerns or made excuses for her actions, you've chosen her over me. Every time you've told me to just ignore her, or that's just how she is, you've prioritized her feelings over mine. I can't be in a marriage where I constantly come second. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to lose you, either of you. What your father said last week, it hit me hard. He asked me if I was a husband first or a son first. I've been thinking about that question ever since. And what's your answer? I asked quietly. I want to be a husband first, Michael said. A husband and a father. But I don't know how. I've spent my whole life trying to please my mother, trying to avoid her disapproval. It's like I don't know who I am without her approval. His vulnerability touched me. For the first time, Michael was acknowledging the unhealthy nature of his relationship with his mother. "That's why we need therapy," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Both together and separately. You need to understand why you've allowed your mother to control you, and I need to learn how to trust you again." We continued talking for hours. I explained about the dark features in Noah's appearance, how they resembled Michael's Italian grandmother on his father's side, a fact that Evelyn had conveniently ignored. Michael shared stories from his childhood, how Evelyn had manipulated him with guilt and conditional love, how she had driven away friends she deemed unsuitable. As the conversation progressed, I could see Michael's perspective shifting. He was beginning to recognize the pattern of control and manipulation that had defined his relationship with his mother for 35 years. "I want to fix this," he said finally. "I choose you and Noah. I choose our family." It was what I had hoped to hear, but I remained cautious. Words are important, but actions matter more. The first action needs to be a clear confrontation with your mother. She needs to understand that her behavior has consequences. Michael nodded, his jaw set with new determination. "I'll talk to her." "No," I said firmly. "We'll talk to her. Together. I want to be present when you set these boundaries. And I want it to happen at my parents' house, where I feel safe and supported." Michael agreed to my conditions, and we set a date for the confrontation. 3 days later, giving us time to prepare and Michael time to gather his courage. As we parted, he hugged me tightly. "I'm going to make this right," he whispered. "I promise." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope that our family might survive this crisis. Different perhaps, but potentially stronger for having faced it. The day of our confrontation with Evelyn arrived with a weight of inevitability. My parents had agreed to host the meeting, though my father made it clear he would ask Evelyn to leave at the first sign of disrespect toward me. My mother prepared a simple lunch, though none of us expected to have much appetite. Michael arrived early to review our strategy. We had decided on a united approach. He would take the lead, but I would be an active participant, not a silent observer. We agreed on key points that needed to be addressed and boundaries that needed to be established. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Michael as we sat in my parents' living room waiting for Evelyn's arrival. He took a deep breath. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway. For us." Evelyn arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably as always. She greeted my parents stiffly, barely acknowledging me, and immediately asked to see Noah. "Noah is napping," my mother said firmly, "and we have some things to discuss before you see him." Evelyn's smile tightened. "I don't see what there is to discuss. I'm here to see my grandson." "Mum, please sit down," Michael said, his voice steadier than I had expected. "We need to talk about what happened at the mall last week." Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "That was just a misunderstanding. Victoria overreacted as usual. I certainly meant no harm." I felt my blood pressure rising, but Michael spoke before I could. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. You publicly accused my wife of cheating on me and questioned my son's paternity. Then you tried to take Noah from her. Those are facts, not interpretations." Evelyn's eyes widened at Michael's direct approach. This was clearly not the compliant son she was accustomed to managing. "I was simply expressing concern," she said, her voice taking on a wounded tone. "The baby doesn't look like either of you, and after all those years of trying—" "Stop," Michael said firmly. "Just stop. We have the paternity test results right here." He placed the envelope on the coffee table. "Noah is undeniably my biological son. But even if he wasn't, even if we had adopted or used a sperm donor or any other means to build our family, your behavior would still be inexcusable." Evelyn glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. "You got a paternity test, Michael. I'm hurt that you felt that was necessary. I never truly doubted." "Yes, you did," I interjected. "You very clearly stated your doubts in front of your friends and everyone in that food court. You deliberately humiliated me and cast doubt on my character." "I was upset," Evelyn said, tears welling in her eyes. "You've been keeping Noah from me, making it difficult for me to bond with him. I just wanted to be involved." "You were at our house almost every day," I pointed out. "You had more access to Noah than most grandparents dream of, but it wasn't enough for you because you couldn't control everything." Michael took over again, his voice gentle but firm. "Mom, this isn't just about what happened at the mall. It's about a pattern of behavior that has been going on since I first introduced you to Victoria. You've never accepted her as my wife or as part of our family." "That's not true," Evelyn protested. "I've always been welcoming to Victoria." My father, who had been silently observing, made a sound of disbelief. Michael continued, "Mum, I love you. You're my mother and nothing will change that. But I need you to understand something. Victoria is my wife. Noah is my son. They are my immediate family now and they come first. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to accept that reality and change how you treat Victoria." Evelyn's demeanour shifted suddenly, her tears disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. "I see what's happening here," she said coldly. "She's turned you against me. After everything I've done for you, Michael, after all the sacrifices I've made, this is how you repay me." "This isn't about repayment," Michael said. "This is about respect and healthy boundaries. Victoria is my wife, and she deserves your respect. If you can't give that, then we need to limit our contact." Evelyn gasped. "You would choose her over your own mother." "I'm choosing my marriage and my child," Michael clarified. "I'm choosing the family I've created. I want you to be part of that family, Mum, but not if you continue to undermine my wife and spread lies about my son." I could see Evelyn calculating behind her eyes, looking for leverage. "Your father will be very disappointed to hear about this," she said finally. "And what about your position in the family business? Your inheritance? Have you thought about what you're risking?" Michael didn't flinch. "Dad already knows, Mum. He agrees with me. As for my inheritance, if that's contingent on allowing you to mistreat my wife, then I don't want it." Evelyn stood up abruptly. "I can see this conversation is pointless. You've clearly made up your mind to believe whatever Victoria has told you. When you come to your senses, you know where to find me." As she headed for the door, Michael called after her. "Mum, wait. I'm not cutting you out of our lives. I'm asking you to change how you interact with us. We can establish new, healthier patterns. We can go to family therapy together, but things cannot continue as they have been." Evelyn paused at the door. For a moment, I thought she might reconsider, but then she straightened her shoulders and said, "I don't need therapy. There's nothing wrong with how I've behaved. When you're ready to apologize for this, intervention, call me." And with that, she left, closing the door firmly behind her. The room fell silent. My father stood up and placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You did the right thing, son. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Michael nodded, looking both relieved and devastated. I moved to sit beside him on the couch, taking his hand in mine. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. "No," he admitted. "But I will be. We will be." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Victoria, for everything. For not seeing it sooner, for not standing up to her years ago. You deserved better from me." I embraced him, feeling the tension of the past weeks begin to dissolve. "This was just the first step," I reminded him. "We still have work to do." "I know," he said. "But for the first time, I feel like I'm making my own choices, not just reacting to her expectations. It's terrifying, but it's also freeing." Just then, Noah began to cry from the other room. Michael and I exchanged a look, and then he said, "Let me get him, please." I nodded, and as Michael went to tend to our son, I felt a cautious hope bloom in my chest. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we had taken the first crucial step toward healing our family. 6 months passed, bringing profound changes to our family dynamic. Michael and I committed fully to therapy, both couples counselling and individual sessions. For Michael, the process of untangling himself from his mother's manipulation was painful but transformative. He learnt to recognise her tactics to set and maintain boundaries and to prioritise our nuclear family without guilt. For me, therapy helped address the trust issues that had developed during those years of feeling unsupported and undermined. I learned to communicate my needs more clearly and to believe in Michael's commitment to our family. Evelyn, true to form, attempted various strategies to regain control after her dramatic exit from my parents' house. First came the guilt trips, lengthy emails to Michael detailing her heartbreak and sleepless nights. When those didn't yield results, she tried sending expensive gifts for Noah, which we returned unopened. Next came the flying monkeys, family, friends, and distant relatives calling to tell Michael how worried they were about Evelyn's health and how he should reconsider his harsh stance. Through it all, Michael remained steadfast. We had established clear conditions for Evelyn's involvement in our lives, respect for me as Michael's wife and Noah's mother, no unsupervised time with Noah, and participation in family therapy. Until she agreed to these terms, contact would be minimal and carefully managed. 3 months after our confrontation, Evelyn finally reached out directly to me, a first in our relationship. Her email was stiff and formal, but it contained something I never expected: an acknowledgement of her behaviour. Upon reflection, she wrote, "I can see how my comments at the mall might have been hurtful. That was not my intention. If you and Michael feel that family therapy would be beneficial, I am willing to attend one session to discuss the situation further." It wasn't a genuine apology, but it was a concession, one that I suspect came after Evelyn realised her usual tactics weren't working. After consulting with our therapist, Michael and I agreed to meet Evelyn in a controlled environment with our family counsellor present. That first session was tense and difficult. Evelyn attempted to control the narrative to paint herself as the victim of a misunderstanding. But our therapist was skilled at redirection, at bringing the focus back to behaviours and their impact rather than intentions. "Whether you meant to hurt Victoria isn't the issue," the therapist explained gently to Evelyn. "The fact is that your actions did hurt her, did damage her reputation, and did create stress in her marriage. Those are the realities we need to address." Evelyn struggled with this concept, but by the end of the session, she had agreed to continue therapy. Primarily, I suspected, because it was her only avenue to access Noah. We proceeded cautiously, scheduling monthly family sessions and allowing Evelyn brief supervised visits with Noah in neutral locations like parks or restaurants. Surprisingly, it was during these visits that I began to see a different side of Evelyn. Away from her usual power base, stripped of her ability to control the situation, she focused more genuinely on Noah himself. She would bring a single thoughtful toy rather than the extravagant hauls of previous visits. She would ask about his development rather than criticizing my parenting. Small changes, but significant ones. Michael's father, Robert, became an unexpected ally in our family's healing process. He had remained mostly on the sidelines during our conflicts with Evelyn, but after our confrontation, he reached out to Michael privately. "I should have done what you did 30 years ago, he told his son over lunch one day. "I let your mother's behavior go unchecked because it was easier than confronting it. I convinced myself it wasn't that bad, that all marriages have their challenges. But watching how she treated Victoria, it made me realize how much I've enabled over the years." This revelation led to a renewed relationship between Michael and his father. They began meeting regularly for lunch or golf, building a connection that had been overshadowed by Evelyn's dominant presence in the family. Robert even started attending some of our family therapy sessions, which added a valuable perspective to our discussions. As for Noah, he thrived blissfully unaware of the adult drama surrounding him. By 9 months, he was crawling everywhere, babbling constantly, and developing a personality that was uniquely his own. Curious, persistent, and joyful. His dark hair and olive complexion remained now clearly identifiable as traits from Michael's paternal grandmother, whose pictures we had dug out of old family albums. When Noah's first birthday approached, we faced a dilemma: how to celebrate this milestone while honouring our new family boundaries. After much discussion, we decided on a small gathering at our home, just grandparents, aunts and uncles, and a few close friends. Evelyn would be invited, but with clear expectations about her behaviour. To my surprise, the party went smoothly. Evelyn arrived with a modest gift, complimented the decorations I had made by hand, and even helped my mother serve cake without trying to take over. There was an awkward moment when one of Michael's cousins commented on Noah's appearance, but Evelyn quickly changed the subject, instead of using it as an opportunity to resurrect old insinuations. As the party wound down, I found myself alone with Evelyn in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. I braced for tension, but instead she said quietly, "He's a beautiful child. You're a good mother, Victoria." The compliment was so unexpected that I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. "Thank you," I managed to say. Evelyn nodded, then added, "I wasn't always fair to you. I had certain expectations about who Michael would marry, and when he chose differently, I reacted poorly. I'm trying to do better." It wasn't a full apology, but from Evelyn, it was monumental. I recognized the effort it must have taken for her to make even this small admission. "I appreciate that," I said sincerely. "Noah deserves to know his grandmother. I want that relationship to be positive for everyone." As our family healing progressed, I found myself drawn to help others in similar situations. With encouragement from my therapist, I started an online support group for women dealing with difficult in-laws. What began as a small forum grew quickly, revealing how common these family dynamics are and how isolating they can feel when you're in the middle of them. Through this community, I shared the strategies that had worked for us: clear boundaries, consistent consequences, professional support, and a united front between spouses. I emphasized the importance of addressing these issues early, before they escalate to the point ours had reached. One evening, as I was finishing up a video call with my support group, Michael came into the home office and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You know what I realized today?" he said, resting his chin on my shoulder. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine standing up to my mother. I was terrified of disappointing her, of losing her approval. Now I can't imagine not standing up for you and Noah. It's like I finally understand what family is supposed to feel like. I turned to face him, touched by his words. "And what does it feel like?" "Safe," he said simply. "Like I can be myself, make mistakes, have different opinions, and still be loved. Not because I've earned it or because I've met some standard, but just because I'm me." That night, as we watched Noah sleeping peacefully in his crib, I reflected on our journey. The mole incident, painful as it was, had forced us to confront patterns that might otherwise have poisoned our family for years to come. It had pushed Michael to make a choice that, while difficult, ultimately led to greater authenticity and freedom. And it had shown me my own strength, my capacity to stand firm in my truth, even when surrounded by doubt. Evelyn and I will never be best friends. The wounds were too deep, the history too complicated. But we have found a way to coexist peacefully, bound by our love for Michael and Noah. She attends family functions without dominating them. She respects our parenting decisions without constant criticism. And most importantly, she has never again questioned Noah's paternity or my fidelity. For his part, Noah is growing into a happy, secure child, surrounded by people who love him for exactly who he is. He has Michael's analytical mind, my stubborn streak, and a smile that's entirely his own. When I look at him, I don't see the pain of that day at the mall. I see the future, bright, hopeful, and free from the toxic patterns of the past. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you deserve respect in all your relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you courage to stand up for yourself too.